So, welcome everyone. This is the ninth session in our Becoming Regenerative series. And the subject matter today, we're working on how do we find will in uncertainty. So, we're going to be obviously working on will and uncertainty. And so, it's almost implied by the title, right? We're not necessarily here to provide answers. And in many ways, we're trying to withhold answering, right? And if we're staying in this realm of uncertainty, we're trying to withhold coming up with answers as a part of a creative process. So what we're inviting you to do today is bring a beginner's mind to all this, like it's the first time you're considering these things. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and we're still holding the kind of principles of participation and engagement in the work. So, to the extent that you can be on camera and participate in the conversation, we encourage you to do that. So, I'm going to turn it over to Miguel to get us started.
Yes. Um, we're gonna start with we're gonna do a few breakouts and all that. And in framing the first one, um, I'm gonna recall upon Krishnamurti and posing. So many people think that they are thinking when they're only rearranging their prejudices. So you're not like generating new content, you're just shuffling around what you already possess. So, on that note, what thought did that just produce in you? And can you describe the process that produced it? So, that's the first question.
And you want to do a little open dialogue to start, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Any resonances or things that
Well,
jumped at anybody?
I'll repeat the quote, I guess. Many people think they are thinking when they're only rearranging their prejudices, according to Christian Murty. What does that produce in you?
Okay. That's a good production. It's settling. So I'll prompt some more. So the next question is, do we have free will, or are we just regurgitating our conditioning? Any comments, any thoughts, strong emotions?
So I saw Georgia, you put in the chat depends. So it depends on what?
Your question wants to put one size fits all. It's I'm sorry, for me it's a mute question because it's irrelevant to life. You cannot apply to an individual who's being created in this precious moment to be an individual, whether they're being dragged kicking and screaming or on pause. It it's mute. One size doesn't fit all.
Okay. Anybody else?
Well, I mean, it does give me pause what he's saying in terms of you're not really thinking if you're rearranging what was it, prejudices? Is that the word? That
Yeah.
gives me a lot of pause. It's like I think, how aware am I if I am really breaking a pattern, or am I leaning into something that maybe I think is new, but maybe it's not based on what I've experienced. So for me, it's kind of like this, it does something inside me to like shake me a little bit of, okay, so what the invitation for me is like pausing even more to identify, am I circling in the same information in a different order? And that makes me very curious about, okay, what do I do to disrupt that?
Mm.
How do I know I'm thinking something completely new? This is fascinating to me, actually.
So on on yeah, Jessica, you said is personality conditioning, and we all act from a place rooted in our personality. Um, well, there is different elements in the construct of personality. Um, so yeah, there's essence and there's experience, and the way we tap into either. Um, so I'll float the next question. Uh, which is kind of where we're getting started with what we're trying to do in the session is, are you do you feel compelled to provide answers, or are you comfortable sitting with a question? So Marcus and I were talking about, often we're paid to be experts and all that, so we have to rapid fire um, solutions, and that limits the capacity to sit with the question. So get it um, to land um, any. Oh, Elaine, I hadn't seen the contrast
Josh
on
had his
your
hand up
hand.
earlier. I don't know if there was something you wanted to jump in on, Josh, before Elena.
Um, yeah, what came up for me in the on the first two questions was um, my compulsion training to be consistent. That if something new comes along, I quickly go through all the positions that I had before, saying if I've, always, and we'll take regenerative, if I'm trying to be regenerative and some new question comes up, my thought is, well, what would regenerative practice have to say? What would be consistent with my regenerative practice, which has the danger of trying to avoid disruption and maybe even taking a bad thought, down a worse road, because we haven't done that. And what also came up while I have the floor on the most recent question is I think that part of my thinking process is to vocalize what I'm thinking. And I think you've all had the experience where you say something that sounded really good in your head, but as soon as it came out of your mouth, you said, that's not what I meant, or, boy, does that sound dumb, but when it was bouncing around my head, it sounded brilliant. And so, my compulsion to react is part of the thinking process, and not one must always have the answers, whether you really have them or not.
Yeah, I mean so now you got my head swimming about what's the value of consistency and what are the dangers of sticking to
Isn't
consistency?
consistency the demon
Right.
of little minds or something like that? There was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
thing I heard in eighth grade, right? But
Hmm.
Uh, Elaine, you had something.
I was shockingly good memory, Josh, that you can remember what you heard in the eighth grade, and I'm very impressed by that. Yeah. So what's coming up for me is around creativity, because it's this you kind of you will yourself to put yourself in a position. And I think it's also maybe some artists are have chosen to become artists because they are actually quite comfortable in the unknown, in the question, in the big vast void of nothingness that you might derive something from. So it's like this willing participation in the yet to become something. And then there is this contract that you almost make as you enter that space where you know that what you do does something to you as well. So there's this kind of almost mystical interaction with the yet to be born. And you can't be there if you're working on a solution, or if you need to just be this vessel, this open container of reception almost, right? So and then you become aware, okay, what am I thinking? Where did that just come from? Was that association, and what was that in terms of? And was that just a download or whatever that's called? Was that divine inspiration? All that stuff. You start to become, the more you practice that, the more you become aware. Is what of what was just happening in that whole thinking, thoughting process, everything that's kind of flying around. So yeah, I think that's what was coming out for me. Just like especially in the comfort of there's a great comfort for me in not knowing anything.
Yeah. So we we can choose, but often seldom choose. We run on automatic, going through patterns of automatic association, and the ego is in charge. Um, but what we're trying working on is um, that you always have another. There's always another choice. So, well, the automatic and the non-automatic, and if we look at what's driving either the automatic or the will to move us away from the automatic. So it could be self-protection, or needing to look um, that you know what you're doing, or in service of something larger. And those are the pulls. And again, that's a instantaneous thing. So when we're confronted with uncertainty, that uncertainty has the capacity to collapse us into that um, more vital and reactive notion. And that's why it's challenging to remain uncollapsed and then looking out. So remaining in purpose and holding the being that we need to be in order to continue and develop, especially when we don't know what's on the other side. So we're going to be working on some breakouts, and the first breakout is called Observing the Duality in Myself. I can't remember, Marcus. Was I introducing or you introducing it?
I think I was going to do it.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So we're going to start this by, well, obviously, one of the principles we try and hold in the work, right, is we need to make this concrete and not just abstract kind of conversations. So we want you to do a little solo journaling for a few minutes around a series of questions, and then we're going to put you in breakouts to continue the conversation on that. Um, so what we want you to do, and Miguel, if you want to share that first slide, you can bring that one up.
Yes.
So we asked you to bring to mind a recent situation or a moment or an event or something in your life that was a moment of uncertainty or not knowing. And the more charged that not knowing would be, right, the stronger it would be, right, the more it probably is calling your attention to want to work with it. Um, Looks like there's a pull down menu in the way there, Miguel, on your screen. If you can
Mm.
get that out of the way. There we go. Thank you. So bring to mind this moment of uncertainty. Um, and maybe, it was a moment in that uncertainty where you reached for an answer too fast. How many times have we all experienced, right, this situation where you spit out an answer real fast, but then you sat with it for a little bit later on and had a different thought, right? Came up with a better idea, kind of thing. So maybe it's that kind of situation. So bring something concrete from your life or your work or whatever it might be to mind, and then consider the following questions. What was your motivation in the moment? What were you, right? Were you trying to protect yourself or the status quo? You needed to look right or capable, or something else, right? What was your motivation? How would you characterize your motivation in that moment? What was the quality of your being, or the energy you were holding in that? At what level of energy were you operating? And some of you are familiar with these levels of energy, but without going through all of them, there's like automatic, sensitive, conscious, right? Is kind of three levels we're often trying to work in. Um, and then how did the two relate between your motivation and the quality of your being in that moment? So take about, I think we had allocated 7 minutes, maybe jot down some notes, do a little individual journaling, and then we're going to put you into breakouts. Any questions? I don't know if you did already, Miguel. I can put the questions in the chat too.
So maybe I misheard something. What is it? Automatic and run?
I'll let Miguel
Uh,
explain that one because I'm not sure.
yeah, so we were just talking generally about your character of your being and the quality of energy. I was not going necessarily through levels of energy. I was saying awake and sensitive, automatic,
Got it.
or with the desire to escape or run.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Run in that way. Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, I saw sensitive and automatic and I extrapolated. If you want to know the thinking behind. Yeah. So there's my
Yeah,
conditioning coming through, right?
yeah, you were doing the
That's
Josh thing.
right.
You're going
I
through
went
the
into
framework.
regenerative practice mode. Yeah, that's right. So how's everybody doing? Feel like you've at least lightly been able to get through this in the situation? Anybody not there? Need another minute or so? We're going to unpack this in breakouts, so you'll have some more time to play. But everybody feel like they're ready? Ready enough? All right. So we got breakouts in threes, and we haven't necessarily introduced the three roles. Many of you are familiar with the three roles, right? Being a resource, being resourced, and observer. So we're asking you to play those roles. We're going to do breakouts of threes. We're asking you to play those roles. The experienced ones can help the ones that maybe aren't as familiar with playing the roles. And we're going to try and get through a round where everybody gets a chance to share their what they came up with and be resourced. And we're doing this for about 18 minutes. So you have like 6 minutes per round. So treat it lightly, quickly. Try to make sure you get all three folks in the group covered. So quick, light, right? Um, kind of walk through.
So we have three groups of three, right, Marcus?
We do. I'm going to ask you to go into room one, and that'll give us three groups of three.
Uh, oh, because you're saying that Jessica is doesn't have the capacity to speak
No,
at the
no, no.
moment.
We
I
have
can join.
two.
I just parked here. I can join.
Oh, no, Jessica's in.
Yeah.
So I created the breakouts, and we have two groups of three and one of two. So I'm going to ask you, Miguel, to go into room one, unless
I joined
somebody
late,
joined.
so I might have thrown off the count.
Yeah, we have 11 people. So
Yeah,
Oh,
that's what I
I,
was
I
saying.
joined
So
so
it
late.
doesn't work
all
that
right.
way.
So somebody may have joined after. All right, let me start over.
I was saying, did I drink enough coffee for my math?
There we go. And let me just check one thing. Just to make sure I got people lined up. All right. I think these will work. So you don't need to go in, Miguel. We got three of three. See you back here.
Yeah, the math worked great.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Love to hear maybe a couple of reflections on what did you notice about the relationship between your motivation and your being state or the quality of your energy state in these kind of situations? What came up? What did you notice about that relationship?
I'm curious. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to reflect from our group, and we really just got through two stories, but the relationship between the being state, like the reaction, and then the being state was actually separate. For Allison had a personal like medical experience where she was reactive, and then it kind of for her it fed into a kind of a downward cycle, like um, she was thinking about it, and then that would bring up the emotions, and so it was initially. Is that a fair description, Allison? What you're saying? So it was like they're like feeding each other, the relationship, into kind of a downward spiral until her sort of community helped to pull her out. I'm very much shortcutting the story. And for me, I really leaned on my community, and I noticed my reaction was really strong, the automatic reaction of like fear and frustration, and I had to counter it by seeking help and seeking other perspectives to help me to stay grounded. And so I was like trying to balance them, knowing that it would be easy for me to get in trouble if I didn't. And hoping that that balance would be mirrored by the others that I was
Yeah.
interacting with.
Yeah, so there was an element of noticing. So I'm curious in Allison's situation, whether you were noticing kind of like this reinforcing spiral happening on, or was it hard to like pause and notice when you're right in the moment and it's happening to you?
Yeah, that was the difference in our experiences. I didn't notice it at first. I
Mm,
was kind of like stuck in it for a few days
mm, yeah.
until I had enough kind of external exposure to mirror back that I could see that maybe I was the outlier on this, understanding of a
Mm,
situation. Whereas when Anya shared her story, it was really beautiful. She seemed to catch herself a lot quicker and be like, okay, before I take this reaction, I'm going to like bring my energy back. I think that's what I heard. I was observing when she was talking, and it was like you were kind of describing like recollecting your energy because you had kind of lost a little bit of it in this like situation, and you're like, okay, to confront this situation, I'm going to need that back to strengthen myself. And I'm going to try to remember that because I just let my energy kind of ooze out and was like, I hate this. This sucks. But it
all
took
right.
me longer to consciously bring it back and put myself back in that driver's seat.
I
Yeah.
do have to add that that wasn't the whole story. Like it has been a roller coaster. It has been up and down, like more negative thoughts, and I have to bring myself back. So it's like a constant effort.
Mm, yeah.
And I can add just a little, being the third person in that conversation, that there were some parallels of both scenarios acting, the motivation was protecting of self. And they were both had a bit of sort of this like fear as an emotion around it. And then there was a breakthrough of then like sharing with more people what was going on was a
Mm,
sort of breakthrough turning point in both scenarios to then sort of mirror yourself in other people's reaction or other people's shared experience too. And then there was an imaging of actually not just standing at the forefront of the concept, but then what is the being in the next step and imaging yourself. Well, what if I actually then
Mm.
went into it or responded to it
mm,
or it did happen or and then that was also a big turning point in both scenarios too, was then imaging yourself in it actually happening and moving through it.
yeah, I think it's an important point, right? We often need others to help us to see, right, where our thinking might be stuck or where, right? It's the going back to that Krishnamurti quote, right? Is how do we do this by ourselves, right? Because we are so heavily influenced by our prejudices, right? By our past conditioning and everything. So, yeah, thanks for bringing that in.
Yeah, and this so sometimes when we try to change our thinking, we're um only changing the content, but not really the sourcing. So it's um that story of the hammer and the nail. We try to see everything as a nail, and we continue to use the same thinking structures that we have used for other things instead of challenging that is holding on us in that moment. So the what we're trying to work on is that noticing. So um, when we're thinking, is noticing how we're thinking, what is sourcing that thinking, what is shaping those thoughts, and we're looking for loosening the attachment to what we already know, so we can hold it but not be um, it's not imposing itself on everything. So so we can continue to explore moving and deepening. Um, so resisting our own mechanicalness and automatic behaviors, about knowing and noticing that that pull is the ego in a way acting as a pole, as an energetic pole pulling toward it, and so we have to dance with it and not attach feel attached to it. So in this, I have a question: what is the role of unlearning what we think we know in regenerating our understanding? Any thoughts, questions, ideas?
Any reflections on that, or even the initial prompt about the relationship between these two? You guys noticed a lot, I think, in what you shared. I think that was great. I don't know if there's anything from the other groups that wanted to be shared.
In terms of like this unlearning sort of thing, it was funny because I got reflected back to me by Georgia in our group. Thank you. That I was like intellectualizing being as a skill. And she was like, "You've been doing that since you were a child." Like we kind of got cut off. But yeah, so even unlearning, I think it is like really an uncovering of all that to get to the essence rather than trying to add more on or this like doing energy. I think there's a lot that I want to unwind in myself with that in terms of being.
Nice.
I'd like to test this concept of unlearning. I think it more as a resolution of what you've known and observed, which is valid, what you've learned, and new learning. I'm not sure you necessarily are going to unlearn something, whether you can. And once you've seen it, it's been seen. But if we look at it as just adding another layer or finding another lens to look at it with, um, sounds more what's really happening than trying to unlearn something. I maybe take an exception, perhaps racism is maybe something that we certainly have to unlearn, but yet it's still systemically there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, my previous session was on unfolding, so it is the kind of taking it back to its essence and then seeing what it is and why it is, kind of thing.
And I think, Georgia brought up this it depends kind of thing is I think it depends upon what it is we're talking about, right? So um we carry a lot of assumptions or beliefs around, right? And so sometimes new learning is unlearning like a thing that we were holding as a belief that right now we're questioning, and that shifts. So is that an unlearning or is that a new learning? Or right, it's feels like it's a little of both to me.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I really liked also, Josh, what you just said about the different lenses and different situations have different possibly applied, and anthropologists have done this for almost a century now, where they have this kind of biased transparency where they go out knowing that they go into field work and they know they come with a bias. They just have a lot of conditioning, they have a lot of things that they bring. And so it's a matter of becoming aware. So maybe it's the unlearning is more so in some situations, maybe also about awareness of, you know, when is what activated and what is now being played out. what is my stuff, what is the between stuff, and what is their stuff, like what is cultural, what is so it's becoming, it's starting to have this nuanced look at things and how we observe and what our being state in that observing is. So it's just fine tuning, I feel.
Yeah, so that I think that's a good segue for. Oh,
Wait,
sorry, Anya, go ahead.
Anya has her hand up. Let's get through
Okay.
that and then
Yeah,
segue.
I was just going to add that I love the idea of the new learning and also tying in that it's a practice and that it does take continual effort and reminders and relearning for these things to stick
Yeah,
or to
and
grow, to
So,
evolve, even
yeah.
not just to stick. Yeah.
And that actually just really spurred something, because I do think actually now, just when you said that, sorry, my brain is just so fried, but the unlearning of the extractive mindset, that is definitely something we must somehow through this practice help people to get through. And so there are certain, like racism, like you brought, there are certain pillars of ways of thinking that we desperately need to do something with. So in that respect, yes, bunch of unlearning is definitely but is again, how do we operate within that, and how do we meet other people, not by slamming them over the head and saying you're an idiot, but instead work with them and try and shift that and do that whole bit. So yeah.
so a framework that can be helpful on all this is the dimensions of will. We're going to work with the dyad, not the tetrad, but I'll let Marcus introduce the framework. I'll share the screen.
Yeah, you want to share that screen. Did you want to do the Bateson thing, or are you feeling like
No,
time's
we're
fast? Okay,
time constraint.
gotcha. So we want to just bring this framework in, right? So the title of the session today is, right, finding will and uncertainty. So we wanted to bring in the dimensions of will to kind of add another layer to your deliberations here. And I'm not going to go over the whole framework. There's actually an 8-term framework that overlays the dimensions of will and existence, and it gets into all kinds of complexity, but I just want to introduce this kind of very lightly. And we're really working on the motivation line in this particular tetrad, right? So the aspects of the dimensions of will that I want you to bring into the next exercise is the cause that you're working on, right? What is it that you're trying to change? What's right? What's generating your internal motivation to want to do something about anything, right? What's the cause that you're working on? And to what aim or what purpose? Right? So at the goal point, right? So in the dimensions of will framework, the motivation line is a cause, right? Leading to a purpose. And that is what generates our will. That's what generates our motivation. You can see the means line is structure and capacity, and we don't necessarily need to bring, you can hold those if you want. We don't necessarily need to bring that into your deliberation. But I wanted to bring this dimensions of will piece and what is it that motivates us when we're working on a cause for a particular purpose. So just kind of hold that in your thinking as we get into this next exercise. And I think you were doing that, Miguel, right?
Yes.
Yep.
So similarly to the previous exercise, we're going to break out in groups of 3, and you're going to again bring a role that is embodied and real, um, and a question of not knowing that something that is unsettled, either professional or personal, and then use that unstable being state to um, ask some questions. So in the previous session, we have three people. One person has the resource role. So that person can only ask questions. So no advice, no judgment, no attempts as guiding or leading with one-dimensional questions. It is just to help explore the thoughts. The other role is the observer, which watches the process in silence, and um, you're tracking how the energy is moving when there's aha moments, or how is the uh, person being asked the questions is moving. And uh, in the end, we'll ask for you to share what you saw. So um, the ask is image a larger living system, a place, a community, a living being, a piece of work you're engaged with that has called for your will in a way that it makes you feel most alive. And what or who I am in those moments serving. So you feel engaged with something, and what or who are you serving in that moment? The second bullet is, what is the source of that will, and how is it maintained? So can we hold it in time, or is it a momentary thing? And thirdly, where in your work does uncertainty currently feel like a threat? So is it being around people, or is it around planning, around execution? Where is that uh, at the moment? And uh, what might it look like to meet it as an opening instead of a barrier or as a fear? So those are the prompts for the breakout, and I'll put them on the chat.
I already have them in, Miguel.
Oh, all right, thanks.
The questions are there. There's also a question for the observer in particular to hold. How did it feel to withhold your answers, and when did the urge to resolve get strongest? Um, so that's specifically for the observer. So um, I think we only got about 15 minutes for this, Miguel, it looks like. Um, so have to treat it lightly and move through quickly. And yeah, we're gonna put you in the rooms. Any questions? Off you
Supposed
go.
to start with the bottom three questions. I don't really understand.
Yeah, so you start in the chat. There's image a larger living system. That's where you start.
Okay.
So we only have
Hello,
a
and
few minutes
welcome
left.
back.
So go ahead, Miguel.
So since we're short on time, what we're gonna do is, how did that exercise make you feel in regards to experiencing uncertainty or not knowing? And do you feel, in a way, uh, some form of paralysis?
Or how does your feelings around uncertainty have they shifted, or and how so?
Say briefly that I think if the will is solid and strong enough that uncertainty can perhaps be a not an overbearing state, that it can be quite manageable, maybe even playful
Mm.
and curious rather than that, like, shadow kind of element.
Yeah, it's what do we bring to the uncertainty, right? That,
Yeah.
yeah, it makes a huge difference. Great.
Oh, you brought up the shadow. So then in this case, if you're doing the dyad, then would be the light, and they're
Yeah.
dancing. Yeah, got it.
Mm.
Yeah, I was with Allison. Allison resourced me, and I think um, at the end I felt so much fire, as in will. I had recounted a project, and then we talked about a new project, but I think that's that resonates a lot as far as will, um, inviting uncertainty in a sense into this dance. And uncertainty became exciting looking back at a project that's complete because I didn't know, but my will was so strong I wasn't going to stop. And I figured something good is going to come, like some vision of that I have about this is going to come to be. I don't know how, I don't know in what way. It was a fundraising thing. I don't know how much I'm going to raise, but I'm going to raise something and it's going to do something. And I think that will, um, yeah, it's a great dance partner with uncertainty.
Racing will is phenomenal for fundraising.
Mm.
So, Marcus, I'll copy that in the chat. So will you guys go with that question? So the question that I'm going to share is, what question am I leaving with that I did not arrive with? So that is homework. You can't have a proper session without homework.
So, real quick, our next session is August 12th, where we're going to be talking about essence to essence resonance with Crystal Carnahan. And so, we also kind of wrote up a little practice. I'll put that as a prompt in the circle community when I share the recording. So, any final reflections on today's session? Anything right? And holding the value of reflection, it's for you, right? Not necessarily, well, helps us all, I think.
I mean, I might just shout out in a quick second the question that I'm leaving with. I love Allison how you pulled in the word playful because like uncertainty to me does feel like a threat normally. And so I think about how do I shift from threat to opening into opportunity, and playful
Mm.
opportunity is so fun to think about. So I'm really grateful for that. So thank you.
Great. Any other final reflections?
Share that coming into this session, I was thinking that, the will is only inside of me. But I think what I heard throughout the session is that you can kind of resource that will from the strength of the community, right? And so you're kind of a channel, but it doesn't necessarily all have to originate from me. It could be good to source it, from the collective. And that was a bit of a shift for me.
Great. Yeah, I
Oh, I
think
love that.
to an extent, right, we're culturally conditioned to think of will as kind of like willpower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not the nature of the will. that we're talking about here, right? It's a much different kind of will. Well, thanks for showing up, everyone. I appreciate you all. And yeah, have a great month. Hopefully, we'll see you next month. See some of you on Fridays, hopefully. And have a blessed day.
You
Thank
as well.
you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
for
you.
another
providing this.
great session.
Bye.
Thank you.
Be well.